The fluorescent lights of Naval Medical Center San Diego hummed their familiar tune as Catherine Morrison pushed through the double doors of the intensive care unit. 11:30 at night, her feet ached in the comfortable sneakers she'd worn for the past 12 hours, and the familiar weight of exhaustion settled across her shoulders like an old coat she couldn't quite shake off. 34 years old, 12 years into her nursing career, and Kate had learned to recognize the particular kind of tired that came from a shift where you barely sat down. 3 critical patients tonight, each one demanding constant monitoring, constant vigilance, constant care. The kind of shift where you moved from room to room with practiced efficiency, where your hands knew what to do before your brain could catch up, where muscle memory and training carried you through when exhaustion threatened to slow you down. But Kate wouldn't have it any other way. She made her final rounds, checking each patient one last time before the night shift took over. The elderly woman in room 302 recovering from open heart surgery, the middle-aged man in 305 fighting back from a stroke, and then there was room 3 Tyler Bennett. Kate paused outside his door, her hand resting on the frame. 4 days now, 4 days since they'd brought him in by helicopter unconscious, broken fighting for every breath. The medical chart told her the basics. 22 years old, multiple fractures, internal bleeding that had required emergency surgery, traumatic brain injury that kept him sedated and connected to more machines than she could count. What the chart didn't tell her was why. Training accident, it said. But Kate had been nursing long enough to recognize when a medical report was deliberately vague. She'd seen training accidents. This wasn't one. The wound patterns were wrong. The classified stamps on half his paperwork were wrong. The complete absence of any family or visitors was wrong. Everything about Tyler Bennett was wrong, and yet Kate found herself drawn to his room more than any other patient on her floor. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The steady beeping of the heart monitor provided a rhythmic backdrop to the quiet whoosh of the ventilator. Tyler lay motionless in the hospital bed, his face partially obscured by the breathing tube, his head wrapped in clean white bandages. Various tubes and wires connected him to the life-supporting equipment that kept him stable, kept him breathing, kept him alive. Kate moved to his bedside with the ease of long practice. She checked his vitals on the monitors, adjusted the IV drip, ensured that everything was exactly as it should be. Then she did something that none of the other nurses did. She pulled up the chair beside his bed and sat down. "Hey there, Tyler," she said softly, her voice gentle in the quiet room. "I'm back for another evening chat. I know you're probably tired of hearing my voice by now, but too bad. You're stuck with me." She'd read somewhere years ago that unconscious patients could sometimes hear what was happening around them, that the sound of a human voice, the touch of a hand, the presence of another person could make a difference in their recovery. Whether it was scientifically proven or not, Kate didn't care. She refused to let Tyler Bennett lie alone in this sterile room fighting for his life without knowing that someone cared whether he made it or not. "Beautiful day outside today." She continued, reaching out to adjust his blanket. 75 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. Classic San Diego weather. The kind of day where you just want to be outside feeling the sun on your face. You'd like it, I think. When you wake up, we'll have to get you outside. Sunshine does wonders for recovery. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Tyler remained motionless, but Kate stayed where she was, talking about the weather, about the news, about the small details of her day that seemed insignificant but somehow felt important to share. She'd been doing this since his first night here. 20 minutes every shift, sometimes more. Just talking. Just being present. The other nurses had noticed. Margaret, the head nurse who'd been working at the facility for 20 years, had pulled Kate aside earlier in the week. "You're spending a lot of time with the SEAL," Margaret had said, her voice carefully neutral. Kate had looked up sharply. "SEAL? His chart says he's an enlisted sailor." Margaret's expression had been knowing, cautious. "His chart says a lot of things, honey, but I've been doing this long enough to recognize when paperwork is telling me what someone wants me to know, not what's actually true. That boy in there, he's special forces, or something close to it." "How do you know?" "The phone calls," Margaret had replied. "We've had several this week, people asking about his condition. People who identify themselves with code numbers instead of names. One call came from a Pentagon extension. You don't get Pentagon calls for regular enlisted sailors, Kate." The conversation had stayed with her. Kate had gone back to Tyler's room that night and really looked at him. At the way his hands, even in unconsciousness, maintained a certain tension. At the scars she could see on his exposed forearms, the kind that spoke of hard training and harder experiences. At the sheer physical conditioning of his body, evident even through the injuries in the hospital gown. Margaret was right. Tyler Bennett was more than his chart suggested, much more. Your friends must be worried about you, Kate said, now checking his pulse manually even though the monitors told her everything she needed to know. Touch mattered. Connection mattered. Wherever they are, whatever they're doing, I bet they're thinking about you, hoping you pull through. She stayed for another 10 minutes talking quietly before finally standing up. Her shift was officially over. Time to go home, try to sleep, come back tomorrow, and do it all over again. I'll see you tomorrow, Tyler. She promised the same words she said every night. Keep fighting. You're doing great. The hospital corridors were quieter during shift change. Kate gathered her belongings from the small staff locker room, said goodbye to the incoming night crew, and headed toward the parking garage. The California evening air hit her as she pushed through the exit doors, cool and refreshing after the recycled atmosphere of the hospital. She took a deep breath, letting it clear her lungs, clear her head. The parking structure was mostly empty at this hour. Kate's small sedan sat in its usual spot on the third level, waiting patiently for her return. She was fumbling with her keys, already thinking about the leftover pasta waiting for her at home, when she heard the sound of car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concrete structure. Kate looked up and felt her heart rate kick up a notch. 3 men in military uniforms were walking toward her. Not toward the hospital entrance. Toward her. Directly toward her. They moved with purpose, with a particular kind of coordinated precision that made Kate's instincts prickle. Even in the dim parking garage lighting, she could see that these were not ordinary soldiers. Their uniforms bore insignia she didn't immediately recognize, and there was something about their bearing, their movement, their presence that commanded immediate attention. The tallest of the 3 men led the way. His face was weathered, suggesting years of outdoor assignments, and his eyes held an intensity that made Kate straighten unconsciously, despite her exhaustion. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that seemed to fill the empty space around them. "Excuse me, are you Catherine Morrison?" Kate's hand tightened on her car keys. She was alone in a parking garage with 3 strangers, military uniforms or not. But something in the man's tone, in the respectful way he'd addressed her, kept her from immediately backing away. "Yes, I am, she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Can I help you with something?" The tall man exchanged a quick glance with his companions before focusing his attention back on her. In that brief moment, Kate saw something pass between them. Some silent communication born of years of working together in situations where words weren't always possible. "Ma'am," the man said, and the formal address carried genuine respect. "We understand you've been caring for Petty Officer Tyler Bennett." The formal use of Tyler's full name and rank surprised her. Throughout his stay, everyone had simply referred to him by his first name. His medical chart had listed him as a regular enlisted sailor. The reverence in this man's voice when he said Petty Officer Bennett suggested there was much more to Tyler's story than she had been told. Much more than the vague medical reports had revealed. "I have been caring for him," yes, Kate replied carefully. She studied the 3 men, noting the way they stood, the way they watched her. Military through and through, but more than that. These were men who'd seen combat, who'd faced danger, who'd learned to assess threats in milliseconds. "Are you family members? I have to tell you that visiting hours ended several hours ago, and his condition hasn't changed since yesterday." The second man stepped forward slightly. He was shorter than the first, but carried himself with the same unmistakable confidence. When he spoke, his voice was rougher, harder-edged, like gravel being turned over. "Ma'am, we're not family," he said, "but we are his teammates. We've been deployed overseas and just received word about his condition. We came as soon as we could arrange transport back to the States." Teammates, deployed overseas, came back as soon as they heard. Kate began to understand that these men were not ordinary visitors. Their use of ma'am when addressing her, their obvious urgency beneath the controlled military bearing, their mention of overseas deployment, it all suggested they were members of an elite military unit. The kind of unit that didn't advertise its existence. The kind of unit that Tyler Bennett belonged to. The third man, who had remained silent until now, spoke with a slight southern accent that somehow made him seem more human, more approachable, despite the obvious deadliness that all 3 men carried like a second skin. "Ma'am," he said, "we know it's late, and we know you've been working all night. We saw you leave the building, and we waited. But we were hoping you might be able to tell us about Tyler's condition. The official reports only tell us so much. We need to know how he really is." Kate found herself in an unusual situation. Hospital policies were clear about patient confidentiality. She couldn't just share medical information with anyone who asked, regardless of their relationship to the patient. But these men were obviously Tyler's military colleagues, and their concern seemed genuine. Deeper than genuine. It seemed like the kind of concern that came from having trusted your life to someone and having them trust theirs to you in return. She made a decision. I can tell you what I've observed during my shifts, Kate said carefully, but you should know that his condition is serious. He's been unconscious since he arrived 4 days ago. His vital signs have been stable, which is good, but the doctors are still concerned about the extent of his head injury. With traumatic brain injuries, you never know how much function will return until the patient wakes up. The tall man's expression grew more serious if that was possible. Ma'am, has he shown any signs of awareness? Any response to voices or touch? Kate thought about the hours she'd spent talking to Tyler, hoping for some sign that he could hear her, hoping for any indication that her presence made a difference. There have been a few moments when his heart rate increased slightly while I was talking to him, she admitted. But the doctors say that could be coincidental. Unconscious patients have fluctuations. It doesn't necessarily mean awareness. But I like to think he knows when people are there with him. I like to think he's fighting to come back. The three men exchanged meaningful looks again, that same silent communication. Kate realized they were talking to each other without words, processing information, making decisions through some form of shared understanding developed through years of working in situations where silence was survival. The shortest of the group pulled out a cell phone and stepped away to make a quiet call. Kate watched him, watched the way he turned his back to create privacy, the way his voice dropped to barely a murmur. Whatever they were here for, it was more than just a friendly visit. The man with the southern accent continued speaking while his teammate made the call. Ma'am, there's something you should know about Tyler. He doesn't have any family. His parents died when he was 8 years old in a car accident. He was raised in foster care, moved around a lot, never really had a stable home, a stable family. We're the closest thing to family he has. Kate felt her chest tighten. She'd suspected Tyler was alone given the complete absence of visitors, the empty spaces on his intake forms where emergency contacts should have been. But hearing it confirmed, hearing the stark reality of it, made her understand why she'd felt so compelled to spend extra time with him, why she'd taken on the role of providing the human connection he so desperately needed. He's never alone on my shifts, Kate said quietly. I make sure of that. The southern accented man smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to grateful in an instant. We know, ma'am. The staff mentioned it. Tyler's lucky to have you looking after him. The man who had made the phone call returned to the group. He nodded at the tall man, some message passing between them. Ma'am, the tall man said, we've been given permission to see him tonight. We know it's irregular, and we know it's outside of normal visiting hours, but our commanding officer has spoken with the hospital administration. We won't stay long. We just need to see him, need to know he's being taken care of. Kate understood that forces beyond typical hospital protocol were at work. These men had obviously called in favors or used connections that allowed them to bypass normal procedures. She found herself wanting to help them, moved by their obvious devotion to their injured teammate. I can take you up to see him, Kate offered, but I should warn you that he looks pretty rough. The injuries were extensive and he's connected to a lot of medical equipment. It can be shocking to see someone you know in that condition. The tall man's voice was quiet when he replied, carrying a weight of experience that Kate recognized even without understanding its source. Ma'am, we've seen our share of battlefield injuries. We've carried wounded brothers through hell and back. We just need to know he's being taken care of. That someone's watching over him the way we can't right now. As they walked back toward the hospital entrance together, Kate realized that her simple act of compassionate nursing had somehow connected her to a world she had never imagined. These men, who were clearly elite special forces operators, had sought her out specifically because of her care for their teammate. They'd waited in a parking garage, approached her in the dark, all because they needed to know that Tyler Bennett wasn't alone. The automatic doors slid open as they approached the hospital entrance, and Kate's routine end to a night shift had transformed into something entirely unexpected. She led the way through the familiar corridors, but they felt different now, changed somehow by the presence of these three silent warriors walking behind her. They reached the secure doors leading to the ICU. Kate swiped her keycard and heard the electronic beep of approval. She held the door open for the three men, noticing how they moved through the space with careful awareness, taking in every detail, assessing every sight line and exit. I need to let you know, Kate said quietly as they walked down the corridor, that Tyler has been in my thoughts constantly since he arrived. I've been a nurse for 12 years, and I've never felt such a strong connection to a patient's recovery. There's something about him that makes you want to fight for him. The tall man nodded solemnly. Ma'am, Tyler has that effect on people. He's the kind of person who would give everything for others, sometimes more than he should give. He's saved every one of our lives at least once, some of us more than that. Finding out he was down, that he was hurt this badly, it's been eating at us. We needed to see him. They stopped outside room 314. Kate could see the concern etched on each man's face now that they were close. These were warriors who had undoubtedly faced danger and loss before, but seeing their teammate in a vulnerable state was clearly affecting them deeply. Kate pushed open the door and stepped inside. The steady rhythm of the ventilator and heart monitor filled the small space. Various machines displayed Tyler's vital signs in glowing numbers, tracking every breath, every heartbeat. Tyler lay motionless in the hospital bed, and exactly as Kate had left him 20 minutes earlier. His head partially bandaged, tubes and wires connecting him to the equipment, keeping him alive. The three men filed in quietly behind her, and Kate saw their military bearing falter for just a moment. The shortest of the three men, who had identified himself on the walk-up as Wade Thompson, approached the bed first. His hands were steady as he reached out to gently touch Tyler's shoulder, but Kate could see the emotion in his eyes. "Hey, brother," Wade said softly, his rough voice gentling. "We're here. We made it back as soon as we could. You gave us a hell of a scare, you know that." The tall man moved to the other side of the bed. Kate noticed how his gaze took in all the medical equipment with what looked like practiced assessment. A medic, she realized, or someone with medical training beyond basic first aid. "Tyler," the tall man said, "you need to wake up, man. We've got stories to tell you about how the mission went, and you're missing all the good parts. Besides, you owe me $50 from that poker game, and I'm not letting you die before you pay up." The casual humor delivered in such a serious tone somehow made the moment more real, more human. These weren't just warriors visiting a fallen comrade. These were brothers, family, bound by experiences Kate couldn't begin to imagine. The third man, the one with the southern accent, stood at the foot of the bed with his hands clasped behind his back. Despite their casual words, Kate noticed that all three men maintained perfect military bearing, even in this intimate moment. Discipline and emotion existing side by side. "Ma'am," the tall man said, turning to Kate, "can you tell us exactly what happened when he was brought in? We know the official story, but sometimes the medical perspective reveals details that don't make it into the reports." Kate moved to the bedside computer terminal and pulled up Tyler's electronic chart. He arrived by helicopter transport 4 nights ago. The paramedics said he'd been unconscious at the scene. The injuries suggested a significant impact, possibly from a fall or explosion. He had multiple fractured ribs, internal bleeding in his abdomen, and the traumatic brain injury that's been our primary concern. We stabilized him in surgery, stopped the internal bleeding, but the brain injury required us to keep him sedated to prevent further damage. Wade looked up from where he'd been studying Tyler's face. "Ma'am, did he have any personal effects with him when he arrived?" Kate thought back to that chaotic night when the trauma team had worked to stabilize Tyler. There was a waterproof pouch that came with him. The security staff took it for safekeeping. I remember seeing what looked like photographs inside before they logged it. The three men exchanged another one of their meaningful glances, and the southern accented man stepped forward. "Ma'am, those would be pictures of his team," he said quietly. "Tyler carries photos of everyone who's served with our unit. He says it helps him remember what he's fighting for, who he's fighting for." As Kate watched these men interact with their unconscious teammate, she began to understand the depth of their brotherhood. This wasn't just professional concern for a colleague. These men genuinely loved Tyler like family. Their presence in the room seemed to generate an energy that the sterile medical environment had been lacking. "I've been talking to him during my shifts," Kate admitted. "I read somewhere that unconscious patients might be able to hear conversations around them. I've been telling him about the weather, reading news articles, just trying to make sure he doesn't feel alone." The tall man's expression softened noticeably. "Ma'am, that means more than you know. Tyler hates being alone. Growing up in foster care, he spent a lot of time by himself. Different homes, different families, never really belonging anywhere until he found the Navy, found us. Having someone talk to him even if he can't respond, that's exactly what he would want." Wade had been quietly observing the various monitors and machines surrounding Tyler's bed. "His numbers look strong," he commented. "Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, all within acceptable ranges. The doctors must be pleased with his progress." "They are," Kate confirmed. "The internal bleeding has stopped completely, and the swelling in his brain has been decreasing gradually. The neurologist is cautiously optimistic, but with head injuries, you never know how much recovery to expect until the patient wakes up and you can assess cognitive function. The southern accented man moved closer to the head of the bed and began speaking directly to Tyler in a conversational tone, as if his teammate might sit up at any moment and join the discussion. You know, Tyler, the mission you were training for when this happened, it was a success. The intel you helped gather made all the difference. Command wants you to know that. Whatever you were doing, whatever you were working on, it mattered. You can be proud of that work even if you don't remember it right now. Kate was struck by the way these men continued to include Tyler in their conversation, treating him as an active participant despite his unconscious state. They spoke about recent operations in vague terms, shared jokes that clearly had history behind them, and updated him on mutual friends, all while maintaining the respectful awareness that he might be able to hear everything they said. Ma'am, the tall man said, addressing Kate again, we understand that Tyler's care has been exceptional since he arrived. Multiple people have mentioned that you've gone above and beyond normal nursing duties. We want you to know that his team appreciates everything you've done, more than we can express. Kate felt a flush of pride mixed with humility. I just did what any nurse would do. Tyler is an easy patient to care about. Wade smiled for the first time since entering the room. Ma'am, you don't know Tyler yet, but when he wakes up, and we believe he will wake up, you're going to discover that he's one of the most grateful people you'll ever meet. He never forgets kindness, and he always finds a way to pay it back. You've made a friend for life, whether you know it or not. As the men continued their vigil, Kate found herself learning more about Tyler's character and background. They told her about his recruitment into the Navy, his determination and dedication to becoming a SEAL, his reputation as someone who could be counted on in any situation. They described training exercises, deployment stories, and the pranks Tyler was famous for, pulling on new team members. He's actually quite funny when he's conscious, the Southern man said with a chuckle. Tyler has this way of finding humor in the worst situations. It's one of the things that makes him such a good teammate. When everything's going to hell and everyone's stressed and scared, Tyler's the guy who can still make people laugh, helps keep everyone focused. The tall man checked his watch and sighed quietly. Ma'am, we're going to need to leave soon. We have to catch a transport back to base in a few hours, and then we're redeploying. But before we go, is there anything specific we should know about his care? Anything we can pass along to his command structure? They'll want to know. Kate considered the question carefully. The doctors are planning to try reducing his sedation tomorrow to see if he shows signs of awakening. It's been long enough that his other injuries have stabilized sufficiently to allow his brain more opportunity to heal. The next 48 hours will be critical. Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out a small military challenge coin. He placed it carefully on Tyler's bedside table where it would be visible, where it would be one of the first things Tyler saw when he opened his eyes. This is from our last mission together, he explained to Kate. Tyler earned this. He should have it when he wakes up. It'll help him remember who he is, what he's part of. The three men took turns saying private goodbyes to their teammate. Each one touched his shoulder or hand, while speaking words meant only for Tyler's ears. Kate stepped back to give them privacy, moved by the obvious love and respect they shared. This was brotherhood in its purest form. Connection forged in circumstances most people would never experience or understand. As they prepared to leave, the tall man approached Kate one final time. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. Ma'am, we're going to be deployed for several more weeks, he said, possibly longer. But we'll be checking on Tyler's progress through official channels. If there's any change in his condition, good or bad, we'll find a way to get back here. He's our brother. We don't leave brothers behind. I'll make sure he gets the best care possible, Kate promised, and I'll keep talking to him until he's ready to talk back. Wade handed Kate a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. The number looked official, like it belonged to some kind of government office, but there was no other identifying information. Ma'am, this is a secure line where you can leave messages for our unit. If Tyler wakes up and asks for us, or if you think he needs us here, don't hesitate to call. Someone will get the message to us no matter where we are in the world. Kate took the paper, folding it carefully and putting it in her pocket. Thank you for coming. I think it helped. Even if Tyler couldn't respond, I think he knew you were here. The southern accented man smiled. He knew, ma'am. Tyler always knows when his brothers are near. It's like a sixth sense with him. They walked to the door together. The three men paused in the doorway, looking back at their teammate one last time. Then they were gone, moving down the corridor with that same purposeful stride, heading back into whatever dangerous world they'd emerged from. Kate stood alone in Tyler's room for a moment, listening to the steady rhythm of the machines. The challenge coin gleamed on the bedside table. The piece of paper with the secure phone number felt heavy in her pocket. Everything had changed in the space of an hour, and yet Tyler remained exactly as he had been. Unconscious. Fighting. Holding on. She reached out and adjusted his blanket one more time. "You've got good friends, Tyler," she said softly. "They love you, and they're counting on you to come back to them. So keep fighting. Keep holding on. You're not alone." Kate left the room and made her way to the parking garage, the secure phone number folded in her pocket, feeling like both a burden and a promise. The three warriors had disappeared back into whatever shadowed world they inhabited, but they'd left something behind. Not just the challenge coin on Tyler's bedside table, but a reminder that some bonds transcended duty and protocol. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Kate thought about her father. He'd tried to explain this once, this sense of connection that went deeper than friendship or professional obligation. Brotherhood, he'd called it. She'd never fully understood. Until tonight. Tyler Bennett had three men who would cross oceans for him, who would bypass regulations and call in favors just to see him, to know he was being cared for. That kind of loyalty wasn't given lightly, and somehow, without meaning to, Kate had become part of that circle. Not a warrior, not military, but someone who'd chosen to stay when staying mattered. Her apartment was dark and empty when she arrived. Kate sat in her car for a long moment before going inside. Tomorrow she would return to the hospital, return to Tyler's bedside, continue the quiet vigils she'd started. But tonight she'd made a promise. To Tyler, to his brothers, to herself. She would not let him face the darkness alone. The following Monday morning brought an unusual energy to the intensive care unit. Kate had spent the weekend thinking about her encounter with Tyler's teammates, replaying the conversation in her mind, remembering the way they'd looked at their fallen brother with such fierce devotion. She found herself even more invested in his recovery than before, if that was possible. As she reviewed his chart during the morning briefing, she noticed that Dr. Patterson had indeed ordered a reduction in Tyler's sedation. The notation was clear and precise, exactly what she'd told the three warriors would happen. The timing felt significant somehow, as if the universe was aligning to give Tyler his best chance at awakening. Kate entered Tyler's room with a renewed sense of purpose. The morning light streamed through the window, catching the challenge coin his teammates had left on the bedside table. It gleamed there like a promise, like a beacon calling him back from wherever his consciousness had retreated. She began her usual routine of checking his vital signs while talking to him about the day ahead. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting his pillow, ensuring his IV line was flowing properly, checking the readings on each monitor. "Good morning, Tyler," she said as she worked. "It's a beautiful Monday morning, the kind of morning that feels like a fresh start. Your friends were here to see you Friday night. They left you something special." She picked up the challenge coin and placed it gently in his hand, folding his fingers around it. "They wanted you to know that your last mission was a success. They said to tell you that your work mattered, that the intel you gathered made all the difference. They're very proud of you, Tyler. Very proud." As Kate reached for the blood pressure cuff, something made her pause. A movement, so slight it might have been her imagination. But there it was again. Tyler's eyelids fluttered just for a moment, but it was definitely movement. Real, purposeful movement. Kate's heart rate kicked up. She'd seen enough false alarms with other patients to remain cautious, but this felt different. This felt like something more than random muscle twitches or reflexive responses. "Tyler," she said, keeping her voice calm and encouraging, despite the adrenaline suddenly flooding her system. "Can you hear me? If you can hear me, try to move your fingers or squeeze my hand." She gently took his hand in hers, the one not holding the challenge coin, and waited. The seconds stretched out like hours. The machines continued their steady rhythm. The ventilator whooshed air into his lungs with mechanical precision. And then she felt it, the faintest pressure from his fingers. Barely noticeable, barely there, but unmistakable. Tyler Bennett was responding. He was in there fighting his way back to consciousness. Kate immediately pressed the call button for the medical team while continuing to speak to Tyler in soothing tones. "That's excellent, Tyler. You're doing great. Keep fighting. The doctors are going to be so happy to see you waking up." Dr. Patterson arrived within minutes, followed by the neurologist, Dr. Williams, and two other nurses. The room filled with purposeful activity as the medical team conducted their examinations. Kate stepped back, but remained in the room, watching hopefully for additional signs of consciousness. "Mr. Bennett, doctor," Patterson said, using a small flashlight to check Tyler's pupil responses. Can you hear me? If you can understand me, try to squeeze my hand. This time, Tyler's response was more pronounced. His fingers closed around the doctor's hand with unmistakable intention, and his eyelids fluttered again, more persistently than before. The effort it took was visible, the struggle to break through whatever fog held him captive. Excellent, Dr. Williams murmured, making notes on his tablet. The pupil responses are much better than yesterday, and the hand squeeze indicates cognitive function is returning. His brain activity on the EEG has been increasing over the past 12 hours. We'll continue reducing the sedation and monitor his progress closely. Over the next several hours, Kate found reasons to check on Tyler more frequently than her other patients strictly required. Each time she entered his room, she spoke to him about what was happening, describing the sounds he might be hearing, explaining the medical equipment around him, reassuring him that he was safe and getting better. By early afternoon, Tyler's eyes were opening periodically, though he still seemed confused and unable to focus properly. Kate was adjusting his IV line when he suddenly looked directly at her, his gaze more alert than she'd seen since his arrival. "Hi there," Kate said gently, smiling at him despite the tears suddenly threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Welcome back, Tyler. You're in a hospital and you're safe. You've been unconscious for several days, but you're getting better." Tyler's mouth moved as if he was trying to speak, but the ventilator tube prevented any sound from emerging. Kate could see the frustration in his eyes as he attempted to communicate the confusion and fear that often accompanied emergence from extended unconsciousness. "Don't try to talk yet," Kate advised, her voice soothing and professional despite her own emotional response to seeing him awake. "You have a breathing tube to help your lungs heal from your injuries. The doctors will remove it once they're sure you're strong enough to breathe on your own. For now, just focus on resting and getting better. You're doing wonderfully." Tyler's eyes moved around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings and medical equipment with what looked like increasing awareness. When his gaze fell on the challenge coin still resting near his hand, Kate saw recognition flash across his face. His fingers reached for it, grasping it with surprising strength. "Your friends from your unit came to see you Friday night," Kate explained, following his line of sight. "3 of them made a special trip back from deployment just to check on you. They left that coin for you, and they said to tell you that you should be proud of your work, that the mission was successful." Tyler's eyes filled with tears, whether from emotion or physical discomfort. Kate couldn't tell for certain, but she sensed that knowing his teammates had visited meant everything to him. The coin was clearly more than just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of something larger, something Kate was only beginning to understand. Dr. Patterson returned later that afternoon with the respiratory therapist to evaluate whether Tyler was ready to have the ventilator removed. After a series of tests measuring his oxygen levels and breathing strength, they decided he was stable enough to breathe independently. "Tyler, we're going to remove the breathing tube now," Dr. Patterson explained in the calm, clear voice doctors used with emerging patients. "It's going to be uncomfortable for a few seconds, but then you'll be able to talk. Take slow, deep breaths and try to stay relaxed." The procedure was over quickly. Tyler coughed several times as his throat adjusted to breathing without mechanical assistance, his face contorting with discomfort. Kate offered him small ice chips to soothe his irritated throat, watching carefully to ensure he could swallow safely. Gradually, his breathing became more comfortable, more natural. "Water," Tyler whispered hoarsely, his first word in nearly a week. Kate provided small sips through a straw, monitoring his swallowing reflex with practiced attention. As his throat became less irritated, Tyler's voice grew stronger, though it still carried the rough quality of someone who hadn't spoken in days. "The guys," Tyler said, looking directly at Kate with an intensity that made her realize just how alert he actually was. "Were they really here, or was I dreaming?" "They were really here," Kate confirmed, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Chief Petty Officer Garrett Pierce, Petty Officer First Class Wade Thompson, and Petty Officer Ryan Jackson. They were very worried about you, and they wanted to make sure you knew they were thinking about you." Tyler's relief was visible, tangible, like a physical weight lifting from his shoulders. "Did they say anything about the mission?" Kate remembered the conversation from Friday night, the careful way the 3 warriors had spoken about classified operations without revealing anything specific. "They said it was successful and that the work you did made a difference. They seemed very proud of you, Tyler." For the first time since waking up, Tyler smiled slightly. The expression transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Good. That's good, then." Over the next few days, Tyler's recovery progressed with remarkable speed. His strength returned, his cognitive function improved dramatically, and his sense of humor emerged exactly as his teammates had predicted. Kate found herself looking forward to her conversations with him as he shared carefully edited stories about his military service and the close relationships he'd formed with his team. They were in the middle of one such conversation on Wednesday afternoon when Tyler suddenly went quiet. Kate looked up from adjusting his IV to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You know," Tyler said slowly, "I remember hearing your voice while I was unconscious. I couldn't respond, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't move, but I knew someone was there who cared about what happened to me. That meant more than you probably realize." Kate felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I just did what any nurse would do, Tyler." "No," Tyler said seriously, his green eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. "You did what family would do. You stayed with me when I couldn't stay with myself. You gave me a reason to fight back." "That's not standard nursing care, Kate. That's something else entirely." Before Kate could formulate a response, Margaret appeared in the doorway with an unusual expression on her face. "Kate, you have a phone call at the nurse's station, someone identifying himself as Commander Harrison from Naval Special Warfare Command." Kate felt a flutter of apprehension. Why would a commander be calling her directly? She excused herself and made her way to the nurse's station, her mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to Tyler's teammates? Was there a problem with his care? She picked up the phone with slightly trembling hands. "This is Catherine Morrison." "Ma'am, this is Commander Harrison," the voice on the other end said, carrying the same kind of authority she'd heard in Tyler's teammates. "I understand you've been caring for Petty Officer Bennett during his hospitalization." "Yes, sir, I have," Kate replied, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "Ma'am, I wanted to personally thank you for the exceptional care you've provided. I've received detailed reports from his teammates about your dedication to his recovery, and I understand that your compassion may have played a significant role in his healing process." Kate was overwhelmed by the recognition from such a high-ranking officer. "Thank you, sir. Tyler is a remarkable person, and it's been an honor to help care for him. Ma'am, I also wanted to inform you that Petty Officer Bennett has been recommended for a commendation for his actions during the training exercise that resulted in his injuries." Commander Harrison paused, and when he continued, his voice carried additional weight. "The official report calls it a training accident, but between you and me, that young man saved the lives of 2 other team members at considerable risk to himself. You've been caring for a genuine hero, Miss Morrison." After ending the call, Kate stood at the nurse's station for a long moment processing this new information. Tyler had never mentioned the circumstances of his injuries or the fact that he'd acted heroically. His teammates had hinted at his character, but the full story of his sacrifice was only now becoming clear. When she returned to his room and shared what Commander Harrison had told her, Tyler seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone on the team would do," he said simply. "We look out for each other. That's not heroism. That's just how it works." But Kate understood now that Tyler Bennett's humility was as much a part of his character as his courage. He didn't see himself as a hero because he was surrounded by heroes. To him, sacrifice was simply part of the job. Thursday morning brought an unexpected chill to the air, unseasonable even for San Diego. Kate arrived for her shift to find the ICU buzzing with an undercurrent of tension she couldn't immediately identify. Margaret pulled her aside before she could even check the assignment board. "Kate, something happened last night," Margaret said quietly, her face grave. "Around 3 in the morning, a man was found in the hallway outside Tyler's room. Security detained him, but his credentials checked out. He claimed to be from the Department of Defense doing a routine inspection of facilities treating military personnel." Kate felt cold dread settle in her stomach. What was he really doing? Margaret glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. James Dalton, our head of security, said something was off. The man's badge looked legitimate, but when James called the number on his credentials to verify it was disconnected. By the time James got back to question him further, the man was gone. Security footage from that corridor was corrupted. Conveniently. "Someone tried to get to Tyler," Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what James thinks. He's reviewing all the footage from the past week, trying to figure out who this person really was and if he's been here before." Kate went immediately to Tyler's room. He was awake, sitting up slightly in bed, but the relaxed demeanor from the previous days was gone. He looked tense, alert, his eyes constantly moving to the door and windows. "You heard," he said when he saw her expression. It wasn't a question. "Margaret told me. Tell her what's really going on." The truth this time. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing what he could and couldn't tell her. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. The training accident was a lie, he said quietly. The mission was classified, but it wasn't training. We were gathering intelligence on defense contractor corruption. Billions of dollars in fraudulent spending. I saw things, Kate, documents, communications. Evidence of a conspiracy that goes all the way to the Pentagon. Kate sank into the chair beside his bed, her mind reeling. And someone knows you have this evidence. I don't have it anymore, Tyler said. I passed it up the chain of command before the operation went south. But I'm a witness. I saw everything. If I testify, a lot of powerful people go to prison. If I die before I can testify, the evidence chain breaks. They can claim the documents were fabricated, that there's no credible witness to verify them. So they're trying to kill you. They already tried once, Tyler said grimly. The ambush wasn't an accident, Kate. Someone changed our coordinates, sent us into a kill box. I survived that. Now they're trying to finish the job. Before Kate could respond, James Dalton appeared in the doorway. She'd seen the head of security around the hospital, but had never spoken with him directly. He was a tall man, probably in his early 60s, with steel gray hair, cut in a military style, and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd once worn a uniform himself. Miss Morrison, Dalton said, his voice carrying quiet authority. I need to speak with you and Petty Officer Bennett privately. Kate nodded, her heart pounding. Dalton stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. He studied Tyler for a moment, and Kate saw something pass between the two men. Recognition of a shared experience, perhaps. The acknowledgement of one warrior by another. Son, Dalton said to Tyler, I spent 20 years in the 75th Rangers. Did 2 tours in the Gulf War. I know the look of someone who's been burned by their own people. And I know when someone's being hunted. Tyler's posture shifted slightly, becoming more respectful. Sir, the man who tried to access your room last night wasn't DOD, Dalton continued. His credentials were high-quality forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. I've recovered security footage from other areas of the hospital. He's been here 3 times in the past week, and always at night, always trying to get close to this room. He's a professional, and he's persistent. Have you contacted the authorities? Kate asked, her voice steadier than she felt. I've contacted someone better, Dalton replied. He pulled out a cell phone and made a brief call. Colonel Hayes, it's James Dalton. Yes, sir, it's been too long. Sir, I have a situation here that requires your attention. Kate watched as Dalton explained the situation in crisp military terms. When he ended the call, his expression was grim but determined. Colonel Hayes is with Joint Special Operations Command, Dalton explained. We served together a long time ago. He's going to send a team, but it'll take at least 12 hours to get assets in position. In the meantime, we have a problem. This hospital isn't secure. Too many access points, too many people coming and going. We need to move Petty Officer Bennett somewhere safer. Where? Tyler asked. Dalton smiled slightly. The old VA hospital wing. It's been closed for renovations for the past 6 months. No one goes there except maintenance crews, and I control access. We can fortify it, set up proper security, and wait for Colonel Hayes' team to arrive. You're putting yourself at risk, Kate said to Dalton. Why would you do that? Dalton's expression softened fractionally. Because I've seen this before, Miss Morrison. Good men getting burned by the system they served. Good men being hunted because they did the right thing. I didn't help them then because I didn't know. But I know now, and I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and let it happen again. He turned to Tyler. Can you walk? With help, Tyler admitted. Then we move now before the day shift ends and there are fewer witnesses. Dalton looked at Kate. Miss Morrison, you should go home. This isn't your fight. Kate thought about Tyler lying in that hospital bed for 4 days alone and vulnerable. She thought about the 3 warriors who trusted her with their brother's care. She thought about her father and what he would have done in this situation. No, Kate said firmly. Tyler is my patient. I'm responsible for his care. If you're moving him, I'm coming with you. Dalton studied her for a long moment, and Kate got the distinct impression she was being assessed, measured against some internal standard. Finally, he nodded. All right then, Miss Morrison. But you need to understand what you're signing up for. These people are professionals. They will come, and when they do, it's going to get dangerous. Very dangerous. Then I'll learn to handle dangerous, Kate replied. Tyler looked at her with an expression that mixed gratitude, concern, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Kate, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Kate said simply. You said I stayed with you when you couldn't stay with yourself. Well, I'm not stopping now. Within the hour, they'd moved Tyler to the abandoned VA hospital wing. The space was eerily quiet, filled with outdated equipment and empty rooms waiting for renovation that seemed perpetually delayed. Dalton had chosen a room at the end of a long corridor with only one entrance and windows that overlooked an empty courtyard. Kate helped Tyler get settled while Dalton made phone calls and set up what he called basic security measures. She tried not to think too hard about what those measures might be or why a hospital security chief would know how to implement them. As night fell, Kate found herself in a situation she'd never imagined. Sitting in an abandoned hospital wing with an injured SEAL and a former ranger waiting for professional killers to make their move. Tyler dozed fitfully, his body still recovering from his injuries despite his improving condition. Kate sat in a chair beside his bed, trying to read a medical journal on her phone but unable to concentrate. Dalton stood by the window watching the courtyard with the patient vigilance of someone who'd done this kind of thing before. "Miss Morrison," Dalton said quietly, not turning from the window. "Your father was military, wasn't he?" Kate looked up surprised. "How did you know? The way you move, the way you respond to authority, the way you understand duty without it needing to be explained. You grew up around it." "He was Army," Kate confirmed. "Served in the first Gulf War. Same time as you, probably. He died when I was 16. Cancer from chemical exposure during his service." "I'm sorry," Dalton said, and there was genuine understanding in his voice. "What would he think about you being here right now?" Kate considered the question carefully. "He'd tell me I was crazy. Then he'd tell me he was proud." Dalton smiled, still watching the courtyard. "Sounds like a good man." "He was. He used to talk about brotherhood about the men he served with. I never really understood it until I saw Tyler's teammates Friday night. The way they looked at him, the way they talked about him, that's what my father was trying to explain to me." "It's not something you can explain," Mushy Dalton said. "It's something you have to experience, but you're seeing it now. You're part of it now, whether you plan to be or not." Around 2 in the morning, Dalton's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and his entire body tensed. "They're here," he said quietly. "Security cameras just picked up 3 men entering the hospital through the emergency department service entrance. Professional gear moving with tactical precision. They'll be here in less than 5 minutes." Kate felt fear spike through her veins, cold and sharp. Tyler woke immediately, some sixth sense alerting him to danger even in his weakened state. "Kate," Dalton said, his voice calm but urgent, "listen to me very carefully. There's a storage room 3 doors down the corridor. I want you to take Tyler there and lock the door from inside. No matter what you hear, you stay there until I come get you. Do you understand?" "What are you going to do?" Kate asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "My job," Dalton replied simply. He moved to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out what looked like a security baton. "Now go and take this with you." He pressed something into Kate's hand, a panic button connected to emergency services. Kate helped Tyler to his feet, supporting his weight, as they moved as quickly as his injured body would allow toward the storage room. Her heart hammered in her chest and her hands shook, but she forced herself to stay calm to keep moving. They had just reached the storage room when Kate heard the sound of footsteps in the corridor. Heavy boots, multiple people, moving with purpose. She got Tyler inside and locked the door, her breath coming in short gasps. Through the small window in the door, she could see shadows moving in the hallway, could hear voices low and professional. Then she heard Dalton's voice, calm and authoritative. "Gentlemen, this area is closed for renovation. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The response was immediate and violent, the sound of impact of struggle. Kate put her hand over her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Beside her, Tyler was tense, his jaw clenched, clearly frustrated by his inability to help. The fight seemed to last forever and be over in seconds simultaneously. Kate heard grunts crash as the unmistakable sound of bodies hitting walls. Then silence. Terrible, complete silence. Kate waited, every muscle in her body tensed, her hand hovering over the panic button. Had Dalton won? Were the attackers unconscious? Or had they? Footsteps approached the storage room door. Slow, deliberate. Kate held her breath, pulling Tyler back into the shadows. The door handle rattled, someone testing the lock. Then Dalton's voice, rough but alive. "Miss Morrison, it's over. You can come out now." Kate's legs nearly gave out with relief. She unlocked the door to find Dalton standing in the corridor, his security uniform torn, blood on his knuckles, but very much alive. Behind him, 2 men lay unconscious on the floor. A third was nowhere to be seen. "2 down," Dalton said, breathing hard. The third one ran when he realized he was outmatched. "Colonel Hayes' team will be here within the hour. We're going to be all right." Kate looked at the unconscious men, at Dalton's battered appearance, at Tyler's pale but determined face. They'd survived. Against all odds, they'd survived. Kate sat in the storage room long after Dalton had led Tyler back to his makeshift room, long after the federal agents had arrived and begun their methodical documentation of the scene. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw shadows moving in the hallway, heard the sickening sound of impact, felt the paralyzing terror of not knowing if Dalton would survive. She'd always thought of herself as strong. 12 years of nursing had exposed her to death, to trauma, to the worst moments of human existence. But this was different. This wasn't disease or accident. This was deliberate violence, calculated and cold. Someone had tried to murder Tyler tonight, had come within feet of succeeding, and Kate had been helpless, hiding in a storage room while a 62-year-old security guard fought three armed men. Miss Morrison, Kate looked up to find Dalton standing in the doorway. His uniform was torn, his knuckles bandaged, but his eyes were kind. "The federal agents want to interview you," he said gently. "Colonel Hayes is here, but if you need a moment, I can tell them to wait." Kate shook her head and stood willing her legs to support her. "No, I'm okay." "You're not," Dalton said quietly, "and that's all right. What you witnessed tonight, what you went through, it changes a person. The fear doesn't go away just because the danger passed." "How do you live with it?" Kate asked. "The violence, the fear." "You don't live with it alone," Dalton replied. "You find people who understand, people who've been there. You lean on them when you can't stand on your own." He paused. "You did good tonight, Miss Morrison. You kept Tyler safe. You didn't panic. That takes courage most people don't have." Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She followed Dalton out into the corridor, where federal agents were processing the scene, where Colonel Hayes waited to take her statement, where Tyler lay, recovering from injuries that someone had tried to make fatal. She'd stepped across a line tonight, just as Dalton had said, left the safe world of routine nursing and entered something far more dangerous. But she'd also discovered something about herself. When it mattered, when someone needed her, she didn't run. She stayed, and she would keep staying for as long as Tyler needed her. Kate didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that storage room, listening to sounds of violence in the hallway, not knowing if Dalton would survive, if Tyler would survive, if she would survive. She'd given her statement to federal agents as dawn broke, her voice steady even when her hands weren't. Answered questions about timelines and observations about what she'd seen and heard and done. Professional. Clinical. Everything a good witness should be. But inside, she was falling apart. By the time the sun rose over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed mockingly peaceful, Kate was sitting in the makeshift command post that Colonel Hayes' team had established, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to quiet, replaying every moment of the attack on an endless loop. Federal agents moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, now photographing evidence, interviewing additional witnesses, processing the two unconscious attackers that Dalton had taken down with what Kate now understood was lethal skill, carefully restrained. Colonel Hayes himself had arrived an hour ago, a lean man in his late 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He'd spent 20 minutes in private conversation with Dalton, the two old warriors catching up and assessing the situation with the kind of shorthand that came from decades of shared experience. Now he sat across from Kate in what had once been a doctor's consultation room, his expression serious, but not unkind. "Miss Morrison," Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of someone used to making difficult decisions. "I need to be frank with you about what's happening here. The situation is worse than we initially believed." Kate set down her untouched coffee. "How much worse?" "The two men we captured last night are former military contractors, high-level operators who've done work for various three-letter agencies. They're not talking, but their equipment and methods tell us everything we need to know. Whoever hired them has significant resources and connections." "The defense contractor corruption that Tyler witnessed," Kate said. It wasn't a question. Hayes nodded. "It's bigger than we thought. We're not talking about a few million in fraudulent billing. We're talking about a systematic conspiracy that's been running for 15 years. $2 billion in stolen taxpayer money. Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, defense industry, executives. It's a network. Miss Morrison and Tyler Bennett is the only witness with direct evidence that can bring the whole thing down." Kate felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. "And they'll keep trying to kill him." "They will," Hayes confirmed, "which is why we're implementing additional security measures. Tyler will be moved to a secure military medical facility today. Full protection detail. No one gets near him without multiple layers of clearance." "What about Kate?" Dalton spoke up from where he'd been standing by the window. His face bore the marks of last night's fight bruises darkening along his jaw, but his stance remained strong. These people know she's been helping Tyler. They saw her last night. Hayes's expression grew grimmer. Miss Morrison, I won't lie to you. You are potentially at risk. These people are thorough. They eliminate witnesses and complications. However, we believe the primary focus will remain on Petty Officer Bennett. As long as you maintain distance from him and don't involve yourself further, you should be safe. Kate thought about the past week, about sitting beside Tyler's bed talking to him while he was unconscious, about the three warriors who'd materialized in a parking garage and trusted her with their brother's care, about her promise to never let Tyler face the darkness alone. I want to stay involved, Kate said quietly. Miss Morrison, I appreciate your dedication, but this isn't a nursing matter anymore. This is a federal investigation involving national security. With respect, Colonel Tyler is still my patient, and from what I understand, he doesn't have family. He needs someone who isn't military, someone who can just be there as a person, not an asset to be protected. Hayes studied her for a long moment, and Kate got the sense that he was seeing past her exhausted appearance to something deeper. Whatever he saw made him nod slightly. All right, but understand that if you continue your involvement, you'll need to follow security protocols. No independent contact with Tyler, no discussions about his case with anyone outside cleared personnel, and if at any point we determine your presence is compromising his safety, you will step back. Agreed. Agreed, Kate said, relief flooding through her. Over the next several days, Kate watched as Tyler was transferred to the secure facility and began the complex process of providing testimony to federal investigators. She was allowed supervised visits, always with security present, always under strict guidelines about what could and couldn't be discussed. But she was there, and that seemed to matter to Tyler in ways that transcended the clinical relationship between nurse and patient. On her third visit, Tyler looked more like himself than she'd seen since his awakening. The color had returned to his face, his movements were stronger, and the keen intelligence in his eyes was no longer clouded by pain or medication. Kate, he said as she settled into the chair beside his bed, I need to thank you properly for everything you've done, for staying when you could have walked away, for putting yourself at risk. You don't need to thank me, Tyler. I just did what felt right. No, you did what was right. There's a difference, Visageo. Tyler paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Growing up in foster care, I learned early that most people don't stick around when things get hard. They're nice enough when it's convenient, but the moment it costs them something, they disappear. You didn't disappear, Kate. You stayed, even when it got dangerous, even when you could have walked away. That is not something I take lightly. Kate felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. You remind me of my father, she said softly. He talked about duty and service and taking care of the people beside you. I didn't always understand what he meant, but I think I'm starting to. They talked for another hour, carefully avoiding the topics that security had deemed off limits, instead sharing stories about their lives, their choices, the paths that had led them to this unlikely intersection. Kate learned that Tyler had always wanted to serve, had seen the military as a way to belong to something larger than himself. He learned that Kate had become a nurse because she'd watched helplessly as her father died and had vowed never to feel that powerless again. When visiting hours ended and Kate prepared to leave, Tyler reached out and took her hand. Kate, whatever happens with all this, with the investigation and the trial and everything after, I want you to know something. You changed my life, not just by helping me survive, but by showing me that there are still people in the world who care about strangers for no other reason than it's the right thing to do. That matters. You matter. Kate squeezed his hand, unable to find words adequate to express what his friendship had come to mean to her. 6 months passed in a blur of grand jury testimonies, federal investigations, and slowly unraveling conspiracy. Kate returned to her normal duties at the hospital, though nothing felt quite normal anymore. She'd seen behind the curtain glimpse the darker side of the world her father had tried to protect her from, and that knowledge had changed her in fundamental ways. She kept in touch with Tyler through carefully monitored communications, following his progress as he recovered fully and prepared to return to active duty. She'd met with Colonel Hayes twice more, providing additional testimony about the night of the attack and the events leading up to it. Each time, Hayes had thanked her for her courage and assured her that the investigation was progressing well. On a Thursday afternoon in late spring, Kate received a phone call that made her heart leap into her throat. Kate, it's Tyler. Tyler, how are you? I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. I'm good, really good, actually. His voice carried an excitement she hadn't heard before, and Kate, I have news. Big news. I'm getting married. Kate felt something complicated twist in her chest. Happiness for him, certainly, but also a strange sense of loss she hadn't anticipated. Tyler, that's wonderful. Tell me about her. Her name is Rachel. She's a physical therapist. I met her during my rehabilitation at the Military Medical Center. She's incredible, Kate. She understands the life, understands what service means. She's been through it herself as a Navy veteran. She sounds perfect for you, Kate said, meaning it, despite the odd ache in her chest. She is. And Kate, I want you there, at the wedding. You're family to me, and I can't imagine celebrating without you. The wedding was held on a crisp Saturday in October at a small venue in Virginia Beach, not far from the naval base where Tyler was stationed. Kate flew across the country feeling nervous and uncertain about what to expect. She'd never been to a military wedding before, had no idea what the protocol was, or how she would fit into Tyler's world. Her concerns evaporated the moment she arrived. The venue was filled with Navy personnel and their families, dozens of people in dress uniforms, mixing with civilians in formal wear. But what struck Kate most was the warmth with which everyone greeted her. Tyler had clearly told his story, and his friends and colleagues treated her not as an outsider, but as an honored guest. Garrett Pierce found her almost immediately, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile when he spotted her across the room. Ma'am, he said, and the word carried the same respect it had that night in the parking garage. It's good to see you again. Tyler said you'd be here. It's good to see you too, Chief Pierce, Kate replied. And please call me Kate. Wade Thompson and Ryan Jackson appeared moments later, and Kate found herself surrounded by the three warriors who'd started this whole journey. They introduced her to their wives, their children welcomed her into their circle with an ease that spoke of genuine acceptance. You're part of the tribe now, Wade explained with a grin. Tyler's family is our family. That's how it works. The ceremony itself was beautiful and moving. Tyler stood at the altar in his dress uniform, tall and strong, and utterly transformed from the broken young man Kate had first met in the ICU. Rachel was lovely with kind eyes and a warm smile, and the way she looked at Tyler made Kate's heart swell with happiness for them both. During his vows, Tyler spoke about second chances and the people who believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. His eyes found Kate in the audience. To the angel who stayed when everyone else left, he said, his voice breaking slightly, who talked to me in the darkness when I couldn't answer, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Kate Morrison, you didn't just save my life. You gave me back my faith in humanity. You showed me that family isn't just the people you're born to or the brothers you serve with. It's the people who choose you, who refuse to walk away, who stay even when staying is hard. His eyes found hers across the room. You chose me when I was nobody. A patient without a name on a chart. And that choice changed everything. Rachel and I wouldn't be standing here without you. This family wouldn't exist without you. So this vow isn't just to Rachel. It's to you too, Kate. You're part of this family forever. Thank you for everything. Kate couldn't stop the tears that streamed down her face. Around her, she heard sniffles from other guests, saw hardened warriors discreetly wiping their eyes. The reception was joyful and rowdy, filled with laughter and music, and the kind of camaraderie that Kate had only heard about in her father's stories. She found herself talking with Rachel, who proved to be as warm and genuine as Tyler had described. He talks about you all the time. Rachel said, her hand resting on Kate's arm with easy affection. About how you stayed with him, how you protected him. You gave him back his life, Kate. I'm marrying him because you made that possible. Thank you. I just did my job, Kate protested, but Rachel shook her head. No, you did so much more than that. And I want you to know that you're family now. Not just to Tyler, but to me too. We're going to have children someday, and I hope you'll be part of their lives. I hope they'll grow up knowing the woman who saved their father. Kate was overwhelmed, struggling to process the depth of acceptance she was receiving from these people who'd been strangers just months ago. She excused herself to get some air, stepping out onto a balcony overlooking the water. James Dalton found her there a few minutes later. She'd been surprised to see him at the wedding, but Tyler had explained that Dalton had been invited as another member of his extended family. Beautiful evening, Dalton observed, standing beside her at the railing. It is, Kate agreed. I didn't expect this, any of this. I thought I'd just be a nurse who helped a patient. I didn't expect to gain a whole family. Dalton smiled, his weathered face crinkling with genuine warmth. That's how it works in this world, Miss Morrison. You show up when it matters, you put yourself on the line for someone else, and suddenly you're not an outsider anymore. You're one of us. Is that what happened to you, Kate asked? In the Gulf War. Something like that, Dalton confirmed. I lost men I cared about because someone in the chain of command made bad decisions for political reasons. I couldn't save them. Couldn't even try because I didn't know what was happening until it was too late. When I saw what was happening with Tyler, saw the same pattern playing out, I couldn't stand by. Not again. Do you think it made a difference, everything we did? I know it did, Dalton said firmly. Tyler's alive. The conspiracy is being prosecuted. 37 defense contractors and 7 Pentagon officials are going to prison. That's because we stood up. That's because you refused to walk away. Later in the evening, Commander Hayes approached Kate with an official-looking folder in his hands. Miss Morrison, I have something for you. The Secretary of the Navy asked me to present this personally. He opened the folder to reveal a citation in metal, the Navy Civilian Service Medal awarded for exceptional service and heroism. For your actions in protecting Petty Officer Bennett and assisting in bringing a major conspiracy to justice, Hayes said formally. The Navy recognizes that you went far beyond the call of duty, putting yourself at risk to protect one of our own. This is our way of saying thank you. Kate stared at the medal, unable to quite believe what she was seeing. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Miss Morrison. Just know that your service is recognized and appreciated. The celebration continued late into the night. Kate found herself dancing with Tyler, laughing at his jokes, feeling lighter and happier than she had in years. This community of warriors and their families had welcomed her completely, treating her not as an obligation or a courtesy, but as one of their own. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Tyler and Rachel found Kate one more time. Before you go, Rachel said, we wanted to ask you something. We're planning to start a family in the next year or two, and we were hoping you'd agree to be godmother to our first child. Kate felt tears threatening again. Are you serious? Completely serious, Tyler confirmed. Your family, Kate. This is what family does. Kate hugged them both, overwhelmed by emotion and gratitude, and a sense of belonging she'd been missing since her father died. I would be honored. The months that followed brought changes to Kate's life in ways both expected and unexpected. She was promoted to a senior position in the ICU, given the opportunity to mentor younger nurses and share the lessons she'd learned about patient care that went beyond clinical skill. She taught them about connection, about seeing the person behind the patient, about never giving up on someone just because they couldn't advocate for themselves. She maintained regular contact with Tyler and Rachel, visiting them when her schedule allowed, watching their life together unfold with joy and pride. She stayed in touch with Dalton, who had retired from hospital security and now ran a program helping veterans transition to civilian life. They met for coffee every Thursday, two people who'd been changed by the same crucible of crisis and had emerged as unlikely friends. She attended gatherings of Tyler's SEAL team, welcomed into their circle of families and friendships. She met their children, heard their stories, learned about the bonds that held them together across deployments and danger. She understood now what her father had tried to explain all those years ago about brotherhood and service and belonging to something larger than yourself. 1 year after the wedding, Kate received a call that brought her rushing to the hospital where Rachel had given birth. She arrived to find Tyler pacing nervously in the waiting room, still in his training uniform, having rushed from base the moment labor started. She's doing great, Tyler said, hugging Kate tightly. The baby's perfect. A little girl. We want you to meet her. Kate followed Tyler into the recovery room where Rachel lay exhausted but glowing, a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets cradled in her arms. The baby had Tyler's green eyes and Rachel's delicate features, a perfect blend of her parents. Kate, Rachel said softly, meet Emma Catherine Bennett. We named her after you. Kate couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She reached out to gently touch the baby's tiny hand, marveling at the perfection of her miniature fingers. She's beautiful, Kate finally managed. Absolutely beautiful. Tyler stood beside her, his arm around Kate's shoulders in a gesture of pure familial affection. She's got a good name to live up to. Strong, compassionate, brave, just like her godmother. Holding Emma for the first time, feeling the weight of this new life in her arms, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a routine night shift, a patient without family, 3 warriors appearing in a parking garage. It had evolved through crisis and danger, through choices made and risks taken, through standing up when it would have been easier to walk away. She thought about her father and wished he could see this, could meet this child named in her honor, could know that his daughter had finally understood what he'd tried to teach her about service and duty and family. The following week, Kate returned to work at the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She was checking the assignment board for her shift when she noticed a new admission. Young Marine, 20 years old, in a coma following what the chart vaguely described as a training incident. No family listed, no emergency contacts. Kate felt a familiar pull, a recognition of need that transcended clinical protocol. She requested the assignment and was approved. As she walked toward the patient's room, she thought about Tyler and how far they'd both come. She thought about the three warriors who trusted her. She thought about Dalton and his determination to not stand by while good men were abandoned. She entered the room to find a young man connected to machines, unconscious and alone. Kate settled into the chair beside his bed and began doing what she'd learned to do best. "Hi there," she said gently. "My name is Kate Morrison, and I'm going to be your nurse. I know you can't respond right now, but I want you to know something important. You're not alone. I'm here, and I'm going to stay here until you're ready to come back." On the bedside table, she placed the challenge coin that Tyler had given her before she left Virginia. It had belonged to his team, but he'd insisted she keep it as a reminder of what they'd been through together. "See this?" Kate said, picking up the coin and holding it where the young Marine could see even through closed eyes. "This belonged to someone very important to me. His name was Tyler Bennett. He was 22 years old when they brought him in, just like you, unconscious, alone. No family listed on his chart." She placed the coin gently in the Marine's hand, folding his fingers around it, just as she'd done with Tyler a year ago. Tyler was in a coma for 4 days. The doctors didn't know if he'd wake up, and if he did, whether he'd be the same person. But he had something that made all the difference. He had people who refused to give up on him. Kate settled into the chair, the same chair she'd sat in beside Tyler's bed, and felt the weight of everything that had happened since. The three warriors materializing in a parking garage. The conspiracy and danger. The night she'd hidden in a storage room while violence erupted outside. The wedding. The medal. The baby named after her. "Three men flew across the world to see him," Kate continued softly. "Navy SEALs who called him brother. They trusted me to watch over him when they couldn't, and I made them a promise that night. I promised I'd never let him face the darkness alone." She reached out and checked the Marine's pulse, her fingers steady and sure. "Tyler made it through. He recovered, testified, helped bring down one of the biggest corruption conspiracies in military history. He got married, had a baby girl. And you know what he told me? He said he remembered my voice in the darkness. That knowing someone was there, someone who cared, gave him a reason to fight back." Kate looked at the young Marine's face, so similar to Tyler's had been. Young, strong, alone. "So here's what I'm telling you," Kate said, her voice carrying the weight of everything she'd learned. "You're not alone. I'm here. And I'm going to stay here talking to you, checking on you, fighting for you until you're ready to come back. Because that's what we do. That's what family does." She paused, thinking about Emma Catherine Bennett, about the community of warriors and their families who'd welcomed her, about James Dalton and his Thursday coffee meetings, about her father and what he'd tried to teach her. "Family isn't always blood," Kate said quietly. "Sometimes it's the people who show up when it matters. The people who stay when others leave. The people who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself." The machines beeped their steady rhythms. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. And Kate Morrison did what she'd learned to do through trial and fire, an unwavering commitment. She stayed, she cared, she fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "Welcome to the family," Kate whispered. And somewhere in that quiet room, in the space between heartbeats and breaths, she could almost hear her father's voice saying the words he'd tried to teach her years ago. "This is what service looks like, Katie. This is what brotherhood means. Not the uniform or the rank or the medal, but the choice to stand beside someone and say you are not alone." Kate smiled through tears she didn't try to hide. She finally understood. Years would pass, bringing more patients, more stories, more lives touched and changed. Kate would eventually become director of critical care nursing, teaching countless students about the importance of seeing the whole person, not just the medical condition. She would attend more SEAL team gatherings, more weddings and baptisms and celebrations of life. She would watch Emma grow up strong and brave, embodying the best qualities of her parents and godmother. But it all started here in this moment, with a simple choice to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. To care when caring came with risk. To stand beside someone in their darkest hour and promise them they weren't alone. That was the legacy Kate Morrison would leave. Not in medals or commendations, though those had their place, but in the countless lives touched by someone who refused to let another human being face their battles without support, without hope, without family. The night shift continued. The machines hummed, and Kate Morrison did what she had always done best. She showed up, she stayed, she cared. And in doing so, she changed the world one patient at a time.